Ladies and gentlemen, let me slow this down right here because this first truth is the foundation of everything else, and most people miss it. A man is deeply drawn to a woman who knows her value without announcing it. She doesn't have to post it, prove it, or perform it. Her worth walks into the room before she does. And the reason this matters is because men don't respond to noise. They respond to certainty. See, when a woman truly knows her value, she doesn't ask questions she's afraid of the answers to. She doesn't wonder where she stands. She doesn't wake up trying to convince someone to see her worth. She already knows. And that knowing changes how she moves, how she speaks, how she loves, and how she allows herself to be treated. A man watches that quietly, closely. He notices that she doesn't rush to be chosen. She doesn't force connection. She doesn't panic when there's silence. And that calm, that confidence, that's magnetic. Because a man understands one thing instinctively: anything valuable doesn't chase, it attracts. This woman doesn't over-explain herself. She doesn't negotiate her standards. She doesn't bend just to keep someone comfortable. And that's not arrogance, that's alignment. She knows who she is, and she's not afraid to stand alone if it means standing in truth. A man sees that and realizes something powerful: this woman isn't afraid to lose me. And when a woman isn't afraid to lose you, you start being afraid to lose her. Now listen carefully. This doesn't mean she's cold. It doesn't mean she's distant or unavailable. It means she's secure. She gives love freely, but not recklessly. She listens, but she also observes. She allows, but she also chooses. And that balance is what shifts a man's mindset from casual to serious. A woman who knows her value doesn't chase potential. She responds to effort. She doesn't fall in love with promises. She pays attention to patterns. She doesn't stay where she has to beg to be seen. And a man, whether he admits it or not, respects that level of self-respect. Because deep down, he knows if he doesn't show up right, she'll move on without making a scene. And here's the part that really hits a man. This woman doesn't compete. She doesn't feel threatened by other women because she's not trying to be anyone else. She's rooted in herself. And that authenticity, that's rare. That's unforgettable. A man may be entertained by many, but he is changed by one. And it's always the woman who stood firmly in her worth. She doesn't test him. She doesn't manipulate. She doesn't withhold affection to gain control. She simply lives in truth. And that truth forces a man to rise or remove himself. There's no confusion around her, no emotional chaos, just clarity. And clarity is powerful. A man wants this woman because she makes him feel like being better, not pressured, not demanded, but inspired. Her standards silently say, this is the level, and it's up to him to meet it or miss out. And when a man realizes he's with a woman who knows her value without saying a word, something clicks. He steps up, he commits, he protects. Because he knows women like that don't come often, and they don't stay where they're not valued. That's why he wants her. Not because she tried harder, but because she knew better. Let's talk about this second truth, because it's one of the most misunderstood things in relationships. Emotional stability and peace are more attractive than beauty alone, and a man learns this not with his eyes, but with his life. Looks may catch his attention, but peace captures his soul. And once a man tastes peace, chaos no longer excites him. A woman who carries peace doesn't bring confusion into every conversation. She doesn't turn small moments into emotional battles. She knows how to pause instead of react, how to listen instead of explode, how to breathe instead of accuse. And that calm presence changes how a man feels when he's around her. His mind slows down. His guard drops. He feels safe enough to be himself, not just impressive. See, men live in a world of pressure, expectations, competition, noise. So when a man finds a woman who feels like rest, he holds on to her differently. He's not constantly trying to defend himself. He's not walking on emotional eggshells. He can sit in silence with her and feel understood without saying a word. And that kind of connection goes deeper than attraction. It becomes attachment. This woman doesn't use emotions as weapons. She doesn't punish with silence or manipulate with tears. She expresses herself clearly and honestly without trying to control the outcome. And that emotional maturity makes a man respect her voice. When she speaks, he listens, not because she's loud, but because she's grounded. Peaceful women don't chase reactions. They don't need to be dramatic to be seen. They don't confuse intensity with intimacy. Instead, they bring clarity. They address issues directly and then let them go. They forgive without keeping score. They love without keeping someone on edge. And a man, whether he says it or not, deeply values that emotional safety. Now here's something important. Peace doesn't mean weakness. It means strength under control. It means knowing when to speak and when silence will say more. It means choosing understanding over ego. A woman like this isn't afraid of hard conversations, but she doesn't turn every disagreement into a war. She seeks resolution, not domination. A man feels that. He senses that she's not trying to win against him, but work with him. And that makes him want to protect her heart, not defend his own. It shifts the dynamic from resistance to partnership. This woman also knows how to self-soothe. She doesn't expect a man to regulate her emotions for her. She has her own tools: prayer, reflection, discipline, self-awareness. So when she shows up in the relationship, she's not empty, she's full. And a full woman doesn't drain a man, she nourishes him. When problems arise, she doesn't threaten to leave to gain control, but she also doesn't stay silent to avoid discomfort. She communicates her needs clearly and then watches actions, not words. And that consistency builds trust. A man begins to relax around her because he knows where he stands. Over time, a man realizes something powerful. His life feels lighter with her in it. His stress doesn't follow him home the same way. His thoughts don't race as much. And that's when he understands this woman isn't just beautiful, she's peaceful. And peace is rare, so he chooses her, not just for how she looks, but for how she makes him feel when the world is heavy. Not for the excitement, but for the calm. Not for the thrill, but for the safety. Because at some point in a man's life, he stops chasing fireworks and starts looking for a place to rest. This third truth goes deeper than attraction and deeper than chemistry, because a woman who chooses herself changes how a man shows up in her life. And most people don't understand this because they confuse self-choice with selfishness. But choosing yourself doesn't mean you don't love. It means you love without abandoning who you are. When a woman chooses herself, she doesn't disappear into a relationship. She doesn't shrink her dreams to make someone else comfortable. She doesn't rearrange her boundaries just to keep peace that costs her self-respect. She shows up whole. And a man can feel the difference between a woman who needs him and a woman who invites him. This woman doesn't wake up checking her phone to decide her mood for the day. Her happiness isn't dependent on attention, reassurance, or validation. She has a life that existed before him and will exist after him. And instead of pushing a man away, that independence pulls him closer because it removes pressure. He's not responsible for her identity. He's simply part of her journey. A man responds differently to that. He doesn't feel trapped. He doesn't feel like he has to constantly prove himself to keep her. Instead, he wants to show up because it feels like a choice, not an obligation. And when love becomes a choice, it becomes stronger. A woman who chooses herself also knows when to say no. She doesn't overextend emotionally. She doesn't give more than she receives, hoping it will balance out someday. She pays attention to energy. If effort is uneven, she adjusts, not to punish, but to protect herself. And that quiet adjustment sends a loud message to a man: this woman values herself. Men understand boundaries better than speeches. They feel them. When a woman chooses herself, she doesn't threaten or manipulate. She simply moves accordingly. If something doesn't align, she doesn't argue her worth. She steps back. And that moment is often when a man realizes what he stands to lose. This woman doesn't tolerate inconsistency. She doesn't romanticize confusion. She doesn't stay in situations that make her question her value. And a man, even if he resists at first, begins to rise to her level or fade out. There's no middle ground with a woman who has chosen herself. Choosing herself also means she listens to her intuition. She doesn't ignore red flags because of chemistry. She doesn't explain away disrespect because of history. She trusts herself enough to walk away from what feels wrong, even when it's hard. And that self-trust is powerful. It tells a man that she will not sacrifice her peace for temporary affection. A man is deeply impacted by a woman who can walk away with grace, not anger, not drama, just clarity, because it forces him to reflect. He can't blame her. He can't say she begged or clung. All he sees is a woman who knew her worth and honored it. And that image stays with him This woman also loves differently. She gives from abundance, not fear. She's affectionate, supportive, and present, but she doesn't overgive to secure a place in someone's life. She loves openly, yet she remains rooted in herself. And that balance makes a man feel safe and challenged at the same time. When a woman chooses herself, she sets the tone. She shows a man what healthy love looks like. She models self-respect without lectures. She demonstrates confidence without arrogance. And whether a man stays or goes, he leaves changed because he's experienced a woman who didn't need him but chose him. And that is what makes a man step up. Not pressure, not pursuit, but presence. The presence of a woman who stands fully in herself and invites him to meet her there. This fourth truth is one a lot of people don't want to hear, but it explains why some women are desired deeply and others are taken for granted. Men desire respect more than control or pressure. And when a woman understands this, everything in the dynamic shifts. Respect doesn't shout. Respect doesn't nag. Respect doesn't try to manage a grown man's behavior. It simply sets a standard and lives by it. A woman who leads with respect doesn't try to change a man into who she wants him to be. She observes who he already is. She listens more than she lectures. She watches patterns instead of clinging to promises. And because she's not trying to control him, a man feels trusted. And trust invites responsibility. This woman understands that constant pressure creates resistance. When a man feels monitored, questioned, or corrected, he closes off. But when he feels respected, he opens up. He starts to consider her feelings without being reminded. He becomes more intentional because it comes from choice, not force. Respect also means she doesn't embarrass him, especially in public. She doesn't mock his flaws or compare him to other men. She protects his dignity the same way she expects him to protect hers. And a man notices that. He feels safe with her, not just emotionally, but socially. He knows she won't tear him down to feel powerful. A woman who respects a man also respects herself. She doesn't tolerate dismissiveness or inconsistency under the name of patience. She doesn't accept crumbs and call it love. Respect goes both ways. She gives it, but she also expects it. And if it's missing, she doesn't beg for it. She removes herself from the situation. Men feel that boundary. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's firm. And firmness earns respect faster than emotional reactions ever will. A man learns quickly that access to her requires effort, honesty, and consistency. This woman also knows how to express dissatisfaction without disrespect. She doesn't attack his character when she's hurt. She addresses behavior. She says what she feels without trying to wound. And that emotional discipline makes a man listen instead of defend. He hears her because she isn't trying to win, she's trying to understand. Respect also shows in how she allows a man to lead without losing herself. She doesn't compete with him for dominance. She supports his vision while maintaining her own. She understands partnership is not about control, it's about cooperation. And when a man feels support instead of challenged at every turn, he becomes more confident in his role. A man also desires a woman who respects his time, his effort, and his intentions. She doesn't minimize what he does right. She acknowledges effort without making it a reward system. She notices consistency, and that appreciation fuels him. A respected man wants to do more, not less. This woman doesn't use ultimatums as tools. She doesn't threaten to leave to gain compliance. She lets her actions speak. If respect fades, her presence does too. And that quiet withdrawal carries more weight than any argument ever could. Over time, a man begins to realize that being with her makes him a better version of himself. Not because she pushed him, but because she respected him enough to let him rise. And that realization creates loyalty. Men don't stay where they feel controlled, but they commit where they feel respected. And a woman who understands this doesn't have to demand commitment. She inspires it. This fifth truth explains why some women stay unforgettable long after a man walks away. Independence creates curiosity and admiration, and a man is naturally drawn to what has its own momentum. A woman who stands in her independence doesn't revolve her life around a man. She allows him to orbit within it. And that shift in energy changes everything. This woman has her own structure. Her days are full. Her goals matter to her. Her joy doesn't wait on permission. She doesn't cancel her life to make space for someone who hasn't yet earned that space. And a man notices that. He senses that she is not available by default. She is available by choice, and choice carries weight. Independence doesn't make her distant, it makes her grounded. She shows up present when she's with him, but she doesn't disappear when she's not. She doesn't over-text to maintain relevance. She doesn't panic when there's a pause in communication. Silence doesn't threaten her because her life is already speaking loudly. A man feels the difference between a woman who needs him to fill a void and a woman who wants him to add value. With the first, he feels pressure. With the second, he feels curiosity. He starts to wonder about her world, her thoughts, her rhythm. And curiosity is the beginning of attachment. This woman doesn't rush intimacy. She lets connection develop naturally. She doesn't force labels or timelines. She allows a man to step forward at his own pace, and in doing so, she reveals something powerful. She trusts herself enough not to rush outcomes. That self-trust makes a man take her seriously. Her independence also means she can walk away. Not impulsively, not emotionally, but with clarity. She doesn't cling to potential or memories. She understands that connection without consistency is a liability. And a man senses that. He knows that if he doesn't show up properly, access to her will close. And that awareness sharpens his focus. This woman isn't impressed by surface-level gestures. She values effort, reliability, and presence. She watches how a man handles responsibility, not how he performs romance. And because she doesn't need him, she can see him clearly. That clarity makes her standards firm and fair. A man is drawn to that fairness. He doesn't feel like he's being tested or trapped. He feels evaluated honestly. And when he realizes she's choosing him from a place of strength, not fear, he steps up differently. Because being chosen by a strong woman feels like honor. Her independence also protects her femininity. She doesn't become hardened or guarded. She remains soft, playful, warm, but she is not fragile. She can laugh, love, and care deeply without losing her balance. And that combination is rare. Softness with strength makes a man feel both challenged and safe. This woman doesn't compete for attention. She doesn't compare herself to others. She's too busy living her life. And because she isn't trying to be impressive, she becomes impressive. A man sees her as someone who would be just as fulfilled without him. And that truth makes him want to be part of her world even more. Over time, independence builds admiration. Admiration turns into respect, and respect becomes desire that runs deeper than attraction. A man may leave, but he doesn't forget. Because independent women don't linger in desperation, they linger in memory. That's why he wants her. Not because she needed him, but because she didn't and still chose connection. This final truth brings everything together. Because authentic femininity makes a man feel safe and inspired in a way nothing else can. And I'm not talking about weakness, performance, or pretending to be something you're not. I'm talking about a woman who is comfortable in her own energy, who doesn't harden herself to survive love, and who doesn't mask her softness out of fear of being hurt. A woman rooted in authentic femininity doesn't compete with a man's role. She complements it. She allows space for leadership without shrinking her own voice. She understands that strength doesn't always need to be loud, and power doesn't always need to be forceful. Her presence is calming, not because she's passive, but because she's secure. This woman knows how to receive. She doesn't block affection with suspicion or pride. When a man shows up, she allows it. She doesn't interrogate kindness or downplay effort. And that ability to receive makes a man feel valued. It tells him that his contribution matters, that his effort lands, that he is seen. Authentic femininity also shows in how she expresses emotion. She doesn't weaponize vulnerability. She doesn't hide it either. She speaks from the heart without blaming. She shares her feelings without demanding rescue. And that emotional honesty creates safety. A man feels trusted, not tested. This woman doesn't confuse independence with emotional isolation. She can stand on her own, yet she still desires connection. She's not afraid to lean in when it feels right. She doesn't punish a man for past hurts he didn't cause. She meets him where he is while remaining true to herself. A man feels inspired by that. He wants to protect her not because she's fragile, but because she's precious. Her softness invites his strength. Her warmth encourages his consistency. And instead of feeling drained, he feels energized in her presence. Authentic femininity also includes grace under pressure. When conflict arises, she doesn't become harsh to feel powerful. She doesn't shut down to gain control. She stays present. She remains respectful. And that composure shows emotional mastery. A man sees that she's not ruled by impulse, and that stability builds trust. This woman is expressive without being chaotic. She laughs freely. She cries honestly. She loves openly. But she also recovers. She doesn't stay stuck in emotional storms. She processes, reflects, and moves forward. And that resilience reassures a man that love with her won't destroy him. It will build him. A man also feels inspired by a woman who honors her feminine rhythm. She rests without guilt. She nurtures without depletion. She creates beauty, peace, and warmth wherever she goes. And in a world that constantly demands hardness, her softness feels like home. Authentic femininity is not about submission. It's about alignment. It's knowing who you are and allowing that truth to lead. It's being gentle without being weak, expressive without being overwhelming, confident without being combative. And a man feels that balance deeply. When a woman embodies this, a man doesn't feel the need to compete or withdraw. He leans in. He becomes more intentional. He wants to rise to the level of care she offers. Not because she demanded it, but because she inspired it. And that's why he wants her. Not for performance, not for perfection, but for the way she makes him feel safe to be himself and strong enough to become more.